Well, good evening, all. Welcome to the GPC meeting for March 19th, moving closer to springtime. Start off with the introduction of the members. We don't have any guests here today, so.
James McMahon.
Jane Evelyn.
Dan Saunders.
Liz Johnson.
And Galen Webley, Director of Planning for Support Services.
Okay.
Paul Hogan is remote.
And Paul Hogan's remote. How you doing, Paul?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. All right, pulling up the agenda. I'm sure the first part of that agenda is approval of minutes. We'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the minutes.
I wasn't here, but I'll second.
All right.
But
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, so 5-0. Thank you very much, Liz. All right. And then, I don't have a copy of the agenda in front of me, so.
Yep. Next up is the Comprehensive Plan Short-Term Strategies discussion.
Excellent,
So would you like me to give you a brief overview?
perfect.
Okay. Again, the Growth Planning Committee, you are all entrusted with the comprehensive plan. That is the community's, long-term vision for what they see themselves the next 10 years and beyond. And so what we have in front of you, which was in part of your meeting packet, is a list of the short-term strategies that are listed in the comprehensive plan. Those strategies either are assigned, you'll see the party on the third to last column. You'll see it'll say Planning Board or Planning Development or Board of Selectmen or GPC. So you are the advisory body to the Board of Selectmen and to the Planning Board to give recommendations on what direction you'd like to see us in implementing the community's vision. And so what this is tonight is just to have a informal discussion amongst you all on which of those strategies we should prioritize. You're going to see this list every year because hopefully we are accomplishing some of these goals and strategies and moving to the next bit for the next 3 years. And then as we move forward, there's medium-term strategies, which is years 4 through 6. And then the long-term strategies are, again, from years 7 through 10 will be the implementation of those strategies. So right now we're just doing, you just passed it in 2023. So we just need to have a discussion on what direction you would like to see the town, this committee, be involved in moving forward on these different strategies. Some of these strategies, too, are very broad-based, and so there might not be a specific project or something that is detailed, but as the community members, we need to make a recommendation on the direction that we'd like to head to the Board of Selectmen and to the Planning Board for implementation purposes. So I'll end it there and open
So I
up.
guess I'll start off with the actual preface that that's what our job is.
Pardon?
I'll start off with the question as whether or not that's really what our job is.
You-
When we develop these actions, these strategies, we did that in concert with the committees and board members and boards that would be taking those on to ensure that they sort of agreed with those and that they would work them into their strategies for how they wanted to run their committees or board or departments, right? So in my mind, it's really those owners, and let's exclude the Board of Selectmen for now because obviously they got a lot of them. That's maybe a bit different. But the other ones, I think, is really ones that like for instance, Public Works, right? Those strategies there should be worked into their budgeting, right, over the next 10 years, whether it's short-term or long-term. And not so much for us to say, hey, you guys really need to work on this one first, and that one second, and that one third. It really kind of fits into what their other requirements are within their own, within the department.
wasn't the expectation put on those boards to they were given the list and they had the opportunity to prioritize that and.
Well, yeah, certainly they had the opportunity to. What we wanted to make sure was that they agreed to them.
Right.
Right. That we didn't want to. Previously, when we had done this, we came up with a bunch of strategies assigned to a bunch of people, and then there was really no follow-up. bad part that we had done was we didn't get their buy-in originally, right? And didn't have really a nice tool or a tool that we could give them and say, hey, here's the strategies. I mean, they were just spread out across the whole plan, at the end of each chapter. So if you were in the Public Works Department, you'd have to spend the whole day going through the plan and, identify, okay, here's one for me out of this section, here's one for me out of this section. We said, we don't want to do that. We want to have something that's going to have that list, which is what we did provide in the appendix in the plan. So anyways, that's that piece. And so I didn't see, I mean, we have some of our own ones that we have to work on. And likely we will support and do things from the planning board, who doesn't really have the time. That's why this committee exists in the first place, and Board of Selectmen. But I'm not sure we really want to provide any type of guidance to anybody else outside of that.
Well, no, and again, we selected the parties were the planning board, planning and development, which is my department. And then it was the growth planning committee, and then the Board of Selectmen. Obviously, the Board of Selectmen and the planning board have a lot on their plate. That's why, this board was created. And certainly, as support staff to you all, planning and development is a very large department. There's a lot of responsibilities.
Sure.
It's good to get community feedback on, what you all think. We need to start an implementation phase. So I wanted to have that conversation with you all. And this would be under the purview of subsection F for section 5-29. That's your growth planning committee. And that is your report out phase. You're supposed to be providing recommendations for the activities and recommendations to how we achieve these goals and strategies in the comp plan. I don't know if that's ever been done in the past, but certainly. Again, I'm going to have, as the Director of Planning and Development, I'm going to be having conversations with our department heads for department-specific ones, but for the ones that are in the purview of the different committees, Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, and GPC, that's under this discussion. Yep.
I mean, I think coming out of the discussions we had on LD 2003, there's two areas, and I'm not sure how they fit into that separate spreadsheet you sent on the short term. But the management of water, for stormwater management across the town, regardless of where you're developing. And then the concern on, because of stormwater and maybe some others, that could be, say, hazardous areas within the growth area. Right, that should be addressed, and I think that there's a bit of that we touch on in the plan, in certain areas. We're talking about the growth area, but I think it certainly has shown itself as a potential issue. That so areas that are now within the growth area, we certainly don't want to push development to, because it would just create a greater hazard and risk for that development. So I think I see those two areas as what we need to really focus on, and would certainly take a majority of this committee's work through 2024, if not further.
Okay.
And I think it's certainly in concert. I did see how the votes made out on last Thursday. Did the Board of Selectmen talk about the LD 2000?
Yes. Yep. They agreed to sign the warrant.
Agreed?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. With the town solicitor provided recommendations, and a lot of them were statutory definitions that she added to it. So, yep. So there will be another public hearing on that, which again the GPC will be invited to at some point before they have it on for a public vote.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, was there anything else in those different strategies and things that you thought, hey, maybe we need to take a look at this as a committee for this year?
Can we just take a step back?
Yep.
Because I think it's worth discussing, because we haven't done what F suggests we do, which is provide an annual report once the comp plan is in place. give a report of its activities, recommendations for inclusions and modifications to the comp plan. And I always kind of thought, having come in onto the board, 5 years into a comp plan, that that it was sort of fixed in place for the 10-year period. But this suggests that we are supposed to annually look at it and update it, and recommend not only ordinance changes, but if there are things that are necessary to change in the comprehensive plan, that's an annual thing for us to do. And the kind of thing Dan just suggested, the review of the growth areas, I think would fall into that bucket. While the comp plan's only a year old or less than a year old, we've had catastrophic storm damage, which has woken the town up to a new reality. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't spend some time to see whether the comp plan and or ordinances are appropriate given what we now know to be a new reality. But just this annual kind of review and make recommendations to the boards, the planning board and the board of selectmen, I can see where you're getting that from, Galen, but it's not something we've done in the past, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, Paul. I mean, the closest we got to that is just doing the report for the annual publication of the town report. But honestly, I don't think anyone's asked for it either.
No.
So.
No, but this is our charter,
Yeah,
unless we want to change it, unless we want to change it.
Yep.
I'd sort of like to enlarge upon the idea of the growth area. And we talked about the problems of water in the growth area and how that might affect development. But also, there's some areas where we have sort of conflicting goals, I think, relative to that in terms of not just water, but habitat and green space. So I think we need to be aware of the people in the growth area also want to have that kind of opportunity to have experienced the nature.
Yeah. I mean, you're correct. I mean, there are a lot of competing aspects within the growth, within the comprehensive plan that we try to, work around. I mean, for every lot, there's different competing features for it, right? The owner's rights, the vernal pools, state laws, shoreline zoning, growth area, non-growth area. So it is, comprehensive. Each part of that plan, if you take it by itself, can lead you in a different direction, where you got to take it as a whole. But you're absolutely correct. All right. So you're looking for. You want to go down the list here and just tick them off?
I mean, I can list them if it's helpful. I mean, there's 3 pages.
Yeah, let me, I don't know why it keeps disappearing on me.
Here, you want to share this? It's tiny.
So the ones in yellow, you'll see at the progress report. This is my little ticker that, to keep track of where we are in progress towards implementation of some of these strategies. The one thing with comprehensive plans, they almost feel like a process. So you do this every 10 years. It's like a big reunion, and then, everyone is singing, all these great ideas, and then it sort of just gets passed, and then it just gets sit on a shelf. And the only person that reads it is people like me that, are nerds about that and like to read these documents and deal with some of the implementation. But a lot of them, it just becomes a practice they do once a decade, and there really is no implementation. And so, I'm, your new director trying to get us to actually implement the vision that, the community wanted to see in voting for this comprehensive plan. And so certainly, there's going to be things that arise, such as, the storms that we had of recent that are going to maybe shift the priorities, but that's where we need the resident input on what direction we'd like to go. So that's just a broad overview.
Well, no, which one in here deals with stormwater?
That would be the, probably the fifth one down under housing. There's about low-impact development design standards. I did put a little comment in there we did for accessory apartments, but certainly there's gonna be all development types.
Yeah, I think, well, when I went through, it's hard to identify these. When I went through the actual plans with all the goals,
Mm-hmm,
there were a couple of strategies, and honestly, that some were long-term.
yep.
I highlighted them all, so let me pull them up. Let me see if I got any that are short-term that match.
So this is the last one on housing, minimize the adverse impacts of climate change? Is that the one you're looking at?
No, I'm sorry, that must have been
Under
the,
housing?
That's the
you-
fifth one.
if you, yeah, if you,
One,
Oh, I
two.
thought you said the
yep,
fifth.
I'm sorry, yeah, if you go there, fifth one, and you go to the strategy box, you'll see it says review current zoning codes, regulations, and policies to incorporate natural design elements and building practices such as low-impact design.
Yeah, that's, okay, that's the one I'm
yep.
looking at. I'm looking at.
Yeah, you look at the goal, yeah, they.
The goal, yes,
Yep,
absolutely. Okay.
yep,
So to kind of what Dan was alluding to, like, the next, column over, so this is the PD and PB, which for the audience stands for,
planning and development, which is the planning
Right.
and development department, and then it's planning board.
right?
Yep,
So this is a strategy that's getting tasked out to them.
yep.
Okay. All right, and then, so, obviously, this is a very
It's eventually gonna,
big review. So what are you asking of us to do? Because I can certainly think that we want this to be a challenge, to be charged out to them.
yep.
So,
So, that would be the recommendation of the GPC, and again, I'll report this out to the planning board and then the Board of Selectmen, that, we've identified stormwater as a major concern. We'd like to focus on an ordinance revision moving forward. And if everyone's in a consensus agreement, because we don't want to waste people's time and staff resources to try to endeavor this if it's not something that's universally, something that's agreed to by the planning board and the Board of Selectmen. As a objective to go forward with. But if everyone's in a go-ahead, then staff would start drafting something, and then it's going to go to the GPC, similar to what you guys have done for other ordinances, and you'd go through that whole process.
right, but I mean, in my opinion, I think I would want people to give me, as a person of this town, I want studies to show, to reflect upon, about, this is a short-term timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're gonna draft something up that's gonna impact me, I wanna know what that is.
Yep.
You know
Oh,
what I
yeah,
mean?
there's a whole
And it's
process.
gotta be, and honestly, and I say that as a pragmatic person.
Yeah.
Not as something that's gonna get forced down somebody's throat to change or do whatever. So I think it's important for people to know what those, either if they consider it an adverse impact of what they're trying to accomplish on their own property or whatever,
Yep.
what in detail that makes sense.
Yep.
So,
And that, again, that's where I need feedback from you all, because, you're going to be spending nights that maybe there are public here. Is this a task that you want us to focus
Yeah.
efforts on? Like, that's
Yeah.
what I need direction from.
right, and obviously, what Jane was kind of saying, something that makes sense right down on the ocean doesn't necessarily make sense in a rural area. So it's kind of, all that, the variables that might go into, what's going to be drafted up.
I sort of see Galen's ask as a professor in a classroom, sort of has given the entire year-long assignment with the curriculum to the class. And it's long and it's huge, and there's a lot to accomplish in that academic year. And then without doing what Galen's asking us to do, it's sort of like the professor saying, okay, I've given you all this, see you at the end of the year. Have fun doing all this work. Whereas I think he's asking us to sort of be the professor and say, all right, short term, what I want accomplished in this semester is X, Y, and Z. Next semester, PDQ. So that by the end of the whole year, i.e. by the end of this 10-year comp plan, we have prioritized things that are of urgent need to focus on now and less urgent years down the road, so that action actually takes place and things actually get accomplished.
Well, it says here to review current zoning codes. Have we done that? We have, no.
No, well,
That's gonna
No.
be tasked, I mean, in my opinion, the planning board needs to do that.
So staff reviews, and of course, you know, if things come up during planning board meetings, we take note of it, like, okay, this is something that maybe needs to be changed in an omnibus land use change. And we certainly will have something probably this November for you guys to chew on, for other changes that staff's noticed and planning board's noticed. But it's really, okay, where do we want to go and spend our time, treasure, and talent focusing our efforts on? Because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste the residents' time. We all want to move forward on these goals. So that's what this is. It's just informal discussion.
Okay.
I don't expect a final answer tonight. Also, as a full disclosure, all these strategies, I do not expect us to accomplish all of them in the 10-year period. Things get prioritized, you know, that emergencies are more of a higher priority item. But we need to start somewhere in a conversation on where would we like to head and provide that recommendation to the planning board and the board of selectmen, so we're all rowing on the same boat together towards the same goal.
And also, I don't know exactly what low-impact design is. Is that defined somewhere?
Yeah, that's a main DEP and environmental design term. Yep. So it's basically to stop the impacts of development stormwater, i.e. stormwater, from pre to post development, that it's the same flow, so you're not creating an adverse impact. It's low impact. Yep. And they use certain improvements such as rain gardens, rain barrels. There's a whole bunch of things you can do to help minimize the stormwater impact. Yep.
And this, Paul, this was one that Ed pointed out when we were doing the accessory dwelling unit recommendations, that we were going towards low impact for a accessory dwelling unit that was going to be built outside of the existing structure, and there was nothing to prevent impacts on neighbors from this additional surface area being taken up by building, which in certain areas of town, as Jim pointed out, could have a big impact. In other areas, not so much. So Ed pointed out that we should look at across all building to make sure we harmonize and don't have unique kinds of requirements for particular kind of structure and not for another structure. So I'm certainly in favor of this number 5 review happening as a high priority
Yeah, let's do it.
for the department.
So,
And I,
Okay.
when would we have, you know, more detailed information to kind of analyze this?
So right now, I mean, the general consensus is you want me to look at stormwater regs, from what I gathered so far. If there's certain other strategies, we can do a couple things. I don't think.
I think, just to take another step back again.
Yep.
You know, this was written in the short term, medium term, and long term was estimate on
Yeah.
what could be done, right? Believe it or not, we cut a bunch of strategies, but we still had a lot of good ideas, you know,
Yeah.
thoughts that should be good ideas that we put in here. But two things have happened since then, was LD 2003 was put through, right? It was right when when we were dotting the i's, it was coming through. So we have one strategy in there to comply with LD 2003, because really didn't know what it was gonna be.
Yep, that was in your strategies, yep.
So, and then the other thing, of course, is these storms we've had recent, which are likely not going away.
Nope.
So anything that would have been associated with stormwater management and LD 2003 would have been more, could have landed in some medium term. So it may be worth, I'm concerned, I mean, with LD 2003, I think we still got gaps, right? The ordinances are being changed, but there are gaps that need to be closed, that we identified. One was stormwater, which we put a bit of a, you know, a finger in the hole to stop it on accessory apartments, but we have a bigger issue around town.
Yep.
In my opinion, that's the number one.
Okay.
And really, the only one we need to focus on and try to get through. If we could get something for the November warrant, that'd be beautiful. Right? I don't know if I would really add anything else in to try to get that passed. I don't know what kind of timeline there are other, and so because of that, I think we ought to look at what are the other ones that we identify where stormwater is potential, whether it's medium or long-term, right? And see if we can get a benefit in doing that, the short-term one with some others that, you know, you can knock off some medium and long-term ones as well. That would be my.
Yeah, I think,
my
yeah, I think a related is the growth area because of LD 2003.
Yeah.
We did not change the growth areas, but we didn't have LD 2003 when we didn't make any recommendations for change to the growth area. So I think it would behoove staff to, to come back to us with, an overlay of the growth areas with the new flood maps and with, if possible, where we flooded. So we can look at the growth areas and see whether they're really appropriate, not only for normal growth, but now the 2.5 time density, which is going to create more havoc. It's a competing goal the state has that, runs right into protect the natural resource and not have the town flooded out by high impact development. So I think I agree with you on number one, but I would think that would be number two.
Okay. So what we did have a goal under housing. And it was minimize the adverse impacts of climate change with a policy to reduce the vulnerability of housing to climate change. And strategy 21 was consider climate impacts when identifying future growth areas. So we can,
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention to you all is there was a state statute which we will be incorporating into your November ballot change for the land use ordinance. And it's actually, I think, a good one. Paul, you were at the last meeting, and I shared the news with the Beach Advisory Committee. LD 1809, which was recently passed, allowed for structures to be, the current structures that are in place to be elevated 3 feet above the base flood elevation. So especially in Goose Rock Beach and a lot of the coastal velocity zones, they'll be able to increase their structures above our height requirements. So we need to add some language in there. Our attorney has already advised us we have to administratively just take care of this for now, but we need to fix our ordinance for that. So I know a lot of owners, especially on the beach, they have expressed that concern with elevating their structures because of recent flooding events, that they can go above our height restrictions. So they can now do that.
And the height restrictions based on the fire, is it solely based on the fire department's restriction?
No, it's based off your local zoning. So each zone has a certain height restriction. Goose Rock's beach is 30 feet. So for structures that go above that, you couldn't be able to do that, but now you
But
can.
that's based on, Dan, am I correct? It's based on Is it based on the fire department code where you can only build a house so high because of fire, like houses burning and, you know, it's either 30 or 35 feet?
I think that was
And
the
if they got a
genesis.
ladders or whatever,
Right.
they can't fight the fire. They can't, you know.
Yeah.
No, that's not why. It was 20 or 30 years ago. Some people who are sitting in our seats right now decided Goose Rocks should only be 30 feet, even though the rest of the town was higher. And it's resulted in generations of flat roofed and, you know, architectural challenged buildings because you couldn't have proper roof lines. If you had a 2-story house, you couldn't have a proper roof line. So that's why
It's a
it was,
variance for that solely Goose Rocks Beach?
yes, it was a choice made
Okay.
put into the comp plan, put into the zoning, that they didn't want Goose Rocks Beach to
Okay.
have taller buildings. That's my understanding. This is
Okay.
long before I came along. Galen, my only question on that is how do we, I'm all for letting people be able to raise their house 3 feet above the, what is it, the 100-year?
Yeah, it's based off the flood elevation for the coastal velocity zones, which I believe that's 3
Yeah.
feet above, if I remember correctly.
And what people put underneath them, I'm shocked at the number of houses, even in the marsh area, that go up with full basements, you know, last year, the year before. And I see they have little flood windows, but I'm shocked that given where they are, they're not on pilings. Shouldn't they be on pilings? Is that state driven, not locally determined?
I believe that's state-driven, but I'd have to look into that, Paul.
I know if you see the new ones right in the frontal dune, and they have to be. You can see they're all up in pilings. Nobody's anymore doing full basements. But I'm and I think it came to everybody's surprise that the back houses were going to get the most damage and be flooded worst and lose their heat and their furnaces and everything else. But that's what happened. And yet it doesn't seem like code requires them to be on pilings. So I'd be interested in just knowing what's possible. What should it be?
I'm wondering about if the height restriction initially may have had something to do with consideration for the neighbors that might be across the street in terms of the effect on their view. And we lived in California for a while, and houses were close together. We had height restrictions, and it had to do a lot with like the daylight plane. So you couldn't restrict sunlight going into somebody else's backyard. We don't really have that problem here, but still, maybe the value of somebody's property across the street might be compromised once we increase the height of these properties that are along the beach.
I figured that's probably what it was, but maybe
It is strange because it's not just Goose Rocks Beach Zone, it's also Cape Porpoise Square, the Free Enterprise, oh no, not Free Enterprise, Cape Porpoise East, Goose Rocks, and then it's Riverfront Zone, and then Dock Square Zone. They're all 30 feet.
All the older historic
Yeah.
areas, perhaps.
So anyway, that's an update that we have to do for LD 2003, not LD 2003, LD 1809. Got to work on that one now.
and so they can go up.
Yeah.
What do you say? Just the
It's
exam.
3 feet of the base flood elevation. They can go above that.
Yeah. Okay.
So if they're 33 feet in the air, that's
36. Yeah. Oh, I mean, we gotta help protect their investment. And
it is planning for the future for
Yeah.
the housing that's there.
yeah,
Yeah.
I want them to feel safe about that.
Yeah. And again, last night it was, Paul, I don't know what your take was on the conversation with DEP. I was surprised by the rulemaking on no new hardscapes. That was a surprising new endeavor. I didn't know they added that in the rulemaking. So I'm going to ask for a handout for that because I know a lot of folks were talking with these these storms as of late doing more hardscaping, and it doesn't sound like DEP wants to permit such new structures.
Is that just at the beach?
Yeah,
Yeah.
down at the beach.
And now, when we're talking about the extra 3 feet, the people behind the people right on the beach, they could raise up 3 feet as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's actually for existing house, not just new construction?
It's existing, I believe new construction, it might be limited. Because again, they're trying, I think DEP is realizing they're trying to limit the impact on the floodplain and what this is having.
And just for the public, can you give us some examples of hardscape? Are you talking like big
Seawalls,
boulders?
like seawalls, yep. That's what people usually think of.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't be able to do that now. And I was surprised that you weren't able to raise your current hardscape. So like, let's say you already had a seawall, you wanted to increase the height of it, you can't do that now.
Wow.
So it's gonna, I'm asking for more information from DEP so I can understand it better, but that was a shocking change.
Yeah, I mean, what are they doing in Louisiana where everything's underwater and they build around it, right?
They have the
I
Army
mean,
Corps levies. Yeah.
Exactly, so,
Yep.
you know, I mean, somebody's protecting their investment, I'm sorry, like, they should be able to do it, like,
But it has an impact
The pro-
on the investment next year.
no,
That's the problem,
right,
James.
but whatever the standard is, I mean, if it's allowable, I mean, you know,
Most of the ones I see down in Louisiana, they're all up on the stilts. There's no, so everything goes underneath.
Just the French Quarter, right? They don't have.
Oh,
yeah,
well,
but,
okay.
right, but that's
They're
below
down in the
sea level,
water.
that's all below sea level, that's all below
I'll
sea
say
level,
New
below
Orleans,
sea
you see
level.
Everything on stilts.
Yeah.
New Orleans, yeah, they just flood.
So Galen, if you had a 40-foot structure right now, which there probably are some, the tides would be even higher. Regardless of your existing height, you'd be allowed to go 3 feet. You'd be able to raise a structure 3 feet above the appropriate elevation level, regardless of the height of the building currently.
Yeah, they measure it from the base of the structure, not the pilings, up at that point. And so I believe your pilings have to follow where the base flood elevation is, so it could be 3 feet above that in addition.
Yeah, I raised a house on New Bedford Road 5 or 6 years ago, and once they established the house had flooded previously before I bought it, and so we wanted to get it up, and we were, the base elevation was like 11. I'm making up these numbers. I can't remember what it was, but we had to make sure that all mechanicals and the first floor joists were 3 feet above that
Yep.
plane. And the house was a ancient house, so it was not high, so it wasn't an issue. It didn't, even raised, it didn't exceed the 30 feet. So we were fortunate. We didn't need a variance.
Right. Yep.
Can I go back if there isn't other discussion on this one, which I think we're in agreement on, back to the accessory dwelling unit one, the third one on the housing.
Yep.
In the performance standards, the one thing that struck me as strange was the front door requirement that we have. I don't know if that's considered a performance standard. You're only allowed to have one front door. And, there are certain, and so we're trying to encourage flexibility on housing and allow more people to put in an accessory dwelling unit. So every property is going to be unique. Certainly, some can fit it inside, some can fit it alongside, some would be in a separate building. But, could the front door of the accessory dwelling unit face the street? It seemed like it couldn't. And I didn't, my mother-in-law moves in, I have to make her walk around the back to get into her garage apartment. It just didn't, I'm sure there was an aesthetic, a a property would look funny with two front doors, but you look at the historic, there are lots of houses that have front porches and a side door over there and a front door and maybe a door off the driveway. So anyway, it occurred to me that we should look at that and see whether that's necessary. I don't have the citation for that in I only have one computer screen up. I can't do that.
Yeah, I think that's under the townwide regulations for, no, it's not there. I looked
Yes.
at the performance standards, I didn't see that. An entrance leading to a foyer with interior entrances leading the two dwellings. Yeah, it says dwelling shall have one front entrance and all other entrances shall be either on the side or in the rear of the dwelling. That might be in like an aesthetic, again, I don't know the rationale when you were all doing this, I believe back in 2000, was it 2009 that they did the accessory apartments? When I looked at.
Yeah, I don't think I was on.
Yeah.
Dan, you would know maybe?
I think maybe from a planning perspective, aesthetics, it might have been,
Yeah.
keep the appearance of not looking like a two-family, but that's the only guess I have.
So in your example, you could have a vestibule or a foyer.
Yeah,
Where
You can do
people
that
could
in the
walk in,
front.
what the front door,
Yeah.
and go to their separate
Yeah.
units.
So that is in your regulations right now, but that's, I don't know the rationale. I'd have to go digging to see what the,
I don't recall
No.
having any rationale in that,
no.
or honestly, a discussion on it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it didn't happen, but it was 2009. Memory stored in your hair, so
No.
that's. Yeah, I don't.
Anyway, I think it's worth having a public discussion on that
Yeah.
and see whether it's important or not.
Yeah, I don't disagree. So we got that one, town ordinance on consistency to main rights to farm. Certainly a good one, but I think would hold off on now.
Which one are you looking at?
The next one down.
Oh, that's a fun one to do.
That was,
We're still on the housing?
no,
The first one in natural resources.
Wasn't there a bill on that recently that people voted on?
You all know what that one is, the right to farm.
Wasn't there something relatively recent that was voted on?
Yeah, so the Maine Constitution was amended to allow a constitutional right to your food on your property. Sorry, that's the right to food, which is, again, fairly similar, but it's being argued that with the pandemic and everything that was happening with food supply, that people, because of local zoning, were not able to do all the things necessary to generate their own food. And so they added this constitutional amendment, which is still, I believe, being litigated right now, and clarified on what's the municipality home rule authority versus what the constitutional amendment says on regulating what you can grow or raise on your property, especially in urban areas where there's a concern of close proximity to other people. Can people have chickens in closer contacted areas or not? Or is it just saying that as long as you can do something, such as a vegetable garden, then that counts? So that's what that conversation's about, which I don't think Kennebunkport has had that discussion,
No.
so.
Thank God.
It sounds it's still being litigated though at the moment, right?
Yeah, there's challenges,
But it's part of the Constitution now.
I'm sorry?
It's part of the Constitution, so we have to, it is. And the question is, do we have to do anything locally? Is there anything in our ordinances that restrict unnecessarily or that are inconsistent with the Constitution?
Right, so.
Right.
So we have a different use for agriculture versus animal husbandry. And so free enterprise and farm and forestry allows for animal husbandry, but outside of that, you can't have animals. So or raise animals for food. So you're restricting it in certain zones. So if someone came to the town and wanted to raise animals in, I don't know, another zone,
For commerce.
no, for food,
For
for
retail.
their own personal
For-
consumption.
But
Okay.
Yep.
chickens are an exception to that, is that right? Can you raise
You
chickens?
can't do that where?
Anywhere where there's no animal husbandry. So you can do that in free enterprise and you can do that in farm and forestry.
I
That's
was
the
gonna say, I
two,
get chickens.
Wow.
yeah.
So do you know what that includes? What,
For animal husbandry, I can get you the definition for that.
200 head of cattle and, like, I mean, if you got that many, I mean,
Boarding,
obviously-
raising, breeding, keeping of animals, fish, or fowl for commercial purposes other than without limitation, swine, poultry, cattle, and horses.
So what, for commercial purposes?
Commercial.
Okay.
But that's the closest definition you have.
Well,
Agriculture doesn't really, it's about the cultivation of the soil, production for the raising of food and crops for other vegetable products. That's,
But if it's for your own consumption, that it complies
Yeah.
with the Constitution.
yeah.
if we start regulating, say you can't have,
Well, in
Chickens on-
those
For
zones.
commerce, so, that's our,
that's our closest definition. So from a quote enforcement perspective, when you don't have a non, like, for example, I did this where we had a definition for non-commercial keeping of livestock. We regulated it, we allowed it in every zone, but we regulated it to keep it small. Like, someone can't have 100 chickens on a half-acre lot. You can't, we limited what your number was. You had a manure management plan, you could do all that regulation. And basically, it was to look out for the neighborhood, you know, for your other neighbors, to make sure that they weren't gonna have issues with flies, manure, odor, all that stuff. So, we don't have anything right now for that. So right now, our general policy, because we don't have it, is you can't do it in these areas. That's for an enforcement
Really?
perspective.
I would think it would be the opposite.
What?
Just tell
Yeah, I
us
would
that-
too.
Yeah, that, in other words, because it's not listed, therefore you could do it.
It's not how.
As long as it's not commercial.
Yeah, it's not commercial.
yeah, but are you referring to that it's not allowed in certain areas because of like, say, like, the growth area? Are you referring to the geographical?
We go by zone.
Right. And so that that makes sense. Like, if you have a half
Well-
acre, 100 chickens, that, yeah, I can see.
People are probably doing this, and we're not.
Yeah.
They're not coming to us.
But where
to
I
say-
am, I have chickens but I'm on 3 acres. It's very low impact. Like,
Yeah.
Do we specifically say that anywhere, that if it's
No, I'm
not
not like-
specifically listed on here, you
the rural,
can't do it?
free enterprise rural area. So,
I mean, it seems to me that we're complying then with the Constitution, because we don't regulate it.
Any land use which is not listed as a permitted use or a conditional use shall be prohibited. The land uses prohibited in each zone shall be listed below, permitted in each zone are listed below. Except as otherwise provided, any accessory use is permitted in each zone, the same approvals and all requirements as applicable to the principal use, and that's a different section. So, yeah, if it's not listed, it's not allowed. And so since we list the closest definition we have, you know, for animal, for
Yeah.
chickens is,
I mean, that's for your own use. I mean, it's just like I repair my car in my own drive,
absolutely.
you know?
if you wanna do
Right, but
that.
like what-
I do it the other way. If it's not listed, you can do it.
Yeah.
That's
No,
not,
but
my
that's not,
attitude.
it's not what your land use says.
like, yeah, Galen
So I
just
have to
pointed
say
out.
that.
What if somebody right downtown,
That's like Dock Square, like
Dock Square,
chickens in Dock Square. Like,
wants to have chickens or ducks and they stink and
Well, if it's for their.
for their own use?
yeah,
The
but you
neighbor's
don't,
gonna
you
get
don't have
pretty pissed
regulations or
off.
anything to stop. Again, is it a conversation you wanna have or not? It's,
I think,
Yeah, I don't want to get in that conversation in a moment. But I'm just saying.
I've done it before.
Okay,
We had no appeals, we had no issues, and,
at the moment, we don't have any issues. I think it's
Yeah.
pretty low in the things to worry about.
yep.
We got more
Yeah.
issue with.
Again,
drainage.
higher priority is, where do you
Yeah.
wanna
Right.
tackle? That's,
Unless
Yeah,
we
I-
have another pandemic, God forbid.
Well, I do want to tackle the ones that are associated with stormwater.
Yeah.
with
Yep.
Growth areas, so.
I have that on your list of
Yeah, so
things
let's,
to.
well, let me ask you this question. How many things can you do in a year? You want 3, 4, 5 things? I mean, honestly, I think that, those two would,
I think those two that you have right now, besides any other land use ordinance changes that we see as staff or with planning board, you know, those are doable. And again, there's some on here that are like, there was one on planning and development for, is for education purposes.
yeah, I mean, I think.
Provide education of climate change. We're actually gonna be doing an open house, and so I'm gonna be doing some of that stuff because that's our
Right, because
department.
we've got the climate action plan that's gonna come out, which
Yeah. They're gonna discuss that, not
should be
this week.
supportive of a lot of items within the comp plan. Because
Yep.
there were a number of items we sent to them and said, hey, does this make sense?
So what are the two things that we want to focus on for now?
The growth area and stormwater.
Stormwater.
Oh, is it the fifth one down in the,
Well, yeah, it's fifth one down, but then there's a number that are not listed here because they were medium-term or long-term that I think we can pick up as part of that review.
Yeah, they should be counted toward that.
And again,
when we do this water resources, protect the quality and quantity of water resources, protect water resources from the impacts of development and reduce the potential of water quality degradation. I mean, that seems doable, doesn't it?
Which one's that?
Yeah, which one's that?
It's
Water resources, okay.
water resources, under the, after housing, to natural resources and then water resources. I mean, that, I don't know what really needs to be done.
for which one?
The water resources,
Okay,
Page 2.
seventh one down.
page 2.
Oh, it's, no,
I think-
page.
No.
Page one.
It's page 1.
Protect water resources.
Second page,
Yep.
natural resources page.
Amend the land use subdivision regulations to include green infrastructure. Is that what you were?
Yeah,
It says green streets and complete streets.
yeah.
Yep. Complete streets is where you have, you make the dimensional standards, that there's an actual ratio dimensions, that it's like the iconic American neighborhood when you think of going Halloween. I think they use Camden as an example of, it's a lot closer, it's not as wide, roadways, and there's, a little bit of lawn out front, and then there's the sidewalk, and then you have the tree canopy over top, and that's what complete streets means. It's a design standard.
Was the telephone poles in that situation? Is that like updated so it's underground now?
That's been the general policy. I'd have to look to see, because especially in more urban areas. I don't know what it would be more in like your transition zone or.
Yeah, because with storms constantly kicking power out and we're talking about canopy trees, it's a conflicting
Yeah.
battle where you're gonna have CMP come down and say, we gotta cut this so the lines are clear, which I want, because I don't want my power going out. So the alternative is to put it underground.
Right.
I think, back to the climate plan, I think we should, if it gets adopted in whatever form it is, rather than wait 10 years to look at it, we should, as the Growth Planning Committee, take a look at what's in there and see whether there are complementary, conflicting recommendations with the comp plan, and if we need to update the comp plan in light of the climate plan, we should, go through that analysis and take a look at it and decide whether to make recommendations in this annual report we are supposed to give every November.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if that should go the other way, right? Hopefully there's nothing that's conflicting.
I think they did, one of the first things they did is they took your comp plan and took some of the
Right.
strategies and was like, hey, we think
Yeah.
these are great things, and they,
I was gonna do
Expanded
that,
on
just
it.
I don't have the
Yeah.
time to do that, but one of the things I was concerned about is, have two different action plans with the same basic strategies, and then, they really be better just reference the strategy that's in the comp plan, because it's a state-approved plan,
yep.
right? And so we don't end up with two people doing the same thing.
And keep in mind too, though, there's some federal funds that you need a climate plan in order to
Well,
get
that's fine,
funding
we
for.
just reference the.
Yeah,
If
yep.
you're, if you're doing an action that's similar in scope to what's already been
Yep.
identified in the plan, I would.
And again, I don't know what the
recommend
discussion with the Board of Selectmen is on making that a permanent committee, a climate action or not. I know right now they're ad hoc.
Yeah.
And so certainly if that's part of the discussion, again, that's more important of why we need to all row the boat the same
Same way,
way and make
absolutely.
sure that we're,
Right. hopefully there's no conflicting.
No,
If they've come up with other things that we, I mean,
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily need to go
they're
in.
more detail oriented
Yeah.
in that area. That's, that's fine.
I mean, I think all that discussion will be, it was just, when I was looking through here, there's stuff talking about education, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's all gonna be supportive of that.
Yep.
Another one that picked out to me was down under historical, because I know the Silver Jackets were engaged, or I thought they were gonna be engaged for the Dock Square area to come up with some recommendations. I don't know where that stands. I know Werner I think he had some communications with them. I thought they had done work, but I don't,
Okay. Yeah, I haven't.
have come across anything.
No.
Uh,
I'll look in that.
Yeah, I thought there was an agreement that they were going to, conduct a study on Dock Square
Yeah.
and come back to us. I think that's,
Is
the
that-
last he reported was, it was commissioned, or whatever the appropriate term is.
Is that the project where they were looking at the Kennebunk and the rising levels? Is that what that was regarding?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, then yes, they did do a study on that. I don't know where that's at in the engineering design stages.
Oh,
but
no, the Kennebunk River, you mean?
yeah, is that's what I didn't know what that term was. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Trying to absorb everything. It's,
Yeah, so that, I mean, there's some work been done on that one,
yep,
which may be helpful in our discussion about growth areas, right?
Yeah.
Because the growth areas extend down to,
The other thing I just learned of recent is FEMA had a discussion on FEMA's different funding mechanisms that they have for not just coastal neighborhoods, but there was also the Economic Development Administration was present in the room, and she mentioned that they have federal funds for commercial areas, and I immediately thought of Dock Square as being one of those places that maybe we need to talk to the EDA about funding to help us with, flood hazard mitigation in the future for that commercial and iconic area of our town. So that's something in the back burner that we are thinking about.
okay.
Anything else sticking out to anyone?
No, not yet.
Did you highlight all the ones that have planning department, or just some of them?
These are the filtered short-term for the planning department, planning board, board of selectmen, or GPC. So these are all the filtered ones for just short-term. And again, there's ones that were ongoing, which again, at that point, those are ones that we're already doing. And then there's medium and long-term. I filtered out the medium and long-term for now. Again, you might be doing some of them right now, but our focus should be focusing on the short-term as outlined in your comp plan. And certainly, again, I'm keeping track of all these different tasks, so we check box all of these. So hopefully at the end of this endeavor, you'll see this is the progress we made in this plan and feel good about what you guys have changed in the community.
Do we know how many feet above sea level the various parts of Kennebunkport are? Is that a map?
Yeah,
we
that's,
have?
yeah.
Yeah.
So how far above sea level is Dock Square?
Certain areas, not too high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's that. It's on the contours, yeah, I'll have to look that up.
There's certain areas that tend to flood more than others.
They didn't have a standard back then when they built those places.
No,
I don't know how we will plan to deal with that.
Yeah, that was the idea behind that Silver Jacket. At least I understood it to be, was to help us take a look at that. How do we address an area such as that?
So I guess we should
Yeah.
check out whatever they.
Put up
can
a
do.
big seawall and have all the water go over the Kennebunk side.
That's all right.
On page 2, under energy, increase multimodal transportation options, prioritize safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. Doesn't have to be like proactively a priority, but have the transportation guys, even at the state level, be aware that when a road is being repaved and repainted, where it is feasible to either widen it or put in a side route for bikers and walkers, that actually take place. Years ago, after they paved School Street, well, I pushed to get a bike path on that road, because all my kids biked to Consolidated at the time, and I saw them actually doing it, but they stopped, or they were going to stop up at like Laurel or some, like, it just didn't make sense. It went like partway down School Street. And I, again, encouraged them to have it keep going, at least like towards the police station more, and they did. Then, fast forward maybe not that long, 3-4 years, and they paved the road again, the state, because it's a state road.
Okay.
And when the state came in to repaint, they didn't
include the,
include the bike path. The shoulder was like this big.
Oh, boy.
So then I went to the town again and said, wait, what happened to our bike path? And they said, oh, well, the state wasn't aware. So come on, let's not have everyone reinvent the wheel. So before a road gets worked on, definitely by the town's got to be aware of it.
Yeah.
But at the state level, there needs to be communication between the town department and the state to not undo what we've done.
and that bike lane connected to existing bike lane infrastructure in town?
Well, our local
Yep.
efforts created it to connect Dock Square area,
Yep.
past Consolidated, up School Street, all the way down to, like Bradbury's. And then the roads are quiet enough, you can go on down to Cape Porpoise Pier and stuff like that. It did not go all the way to Goose Rocks Beach.
Mhm.
But just an awareness of
If it was in
having,
if it was in your comp plan, they should have been following, the main DOT should have been following that. Unless there was a huge, maybe there was a life safety issue that warranted, I don't know what the rationale for why they didn't put it back in, but
well, so then the town went back
yeah.
and repainted over the line, made it wider. After the state had put in their wrong one.
I think the
Liz-
Department of Transportation is just, they're just,
They don't always get the information. I
Yeah,
mean, the
well,
guys
they-
at the,
look at the big ditches
Guys
they
doing
put
the
down the
work.
street here. I mean,
Well, that's why I'm saying, like,
don't get the work.
we don't need to make it a proactive priority, but remind the powers that be that when things happen at the state level here on a state road, that there needs to be some communication.
healthy collaboration is
Yep.
necessary.
Yes.
Galen, is that because, I know all throughout town, we've tried to put in wider shoulders, and the town's been very good about that in the redesign of roads, but I don't think they technically meet a bike path widths, because we just don't have the space in, previously developed areas. So
Yeah,
is that the problem, why the state wouldn't know that? And
maybe, yeah, because
And would the solution be, I know when we put one in along, thanks to Lori Smith, when work was being done on New Biddeford, they put a walking path, which is a walking/biking path, all down one side of New Biddeford, which has been fabulous because people now walk the enormous circle or bike it. But they did paint, little guide, walker in the path. And to alert people that that's why there was a wide shoulder. And maybe that could be done elsewhere to, so it wouldn't get, when it got repaved, someone would say, oh, what's this? It needs to be done every few years so you can still see the little guys on the street. But I think they were effective and it was good design, given the space we had.
Yeah, town plan, the Maine DOT, they have a whole planning division, and so they look at schematics of crash data, in addition to comprehensive plan data as well, and so they do make recommendations on that. Now, what gets implemented in the field might be another thing, so if this is certainly something that, have you brought this to the attention of Public Works?
But way back when I did.
Okay.
When it happened, that's why they repainted.
They did, okay, they did repaint it, yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at the line, there's two lines. One's quite faded by now, but,
Huh,
well, they're both faded, but the state painted line is more faded.
Yep.
Then our town went and made it a little wider, but it's like,
yep,
pretty funny.
But I think in terms of safety, and I know paint was in short supply a few years ago during the pandemic, but I think, we should maintain what we have as part of the comprehensive plan as an objective and not, in addition to thinking about the future, to maintain the current stuff we have. And that would mean repainting it, when it fades. So I think, that's an important goal and strategy.
yep. To answer your question about Dock Square, the elevation is anywhere from 2 feet to 8 feet.
Hey, Galen, on that question, or on the elevation, I don't know where the spring newsletter is, but since the floodplain map is being revised and it's been talked about for, 10 years, and we've had many, many reports about what it was, what it wasn't, what was being appealed, what wasn't being appealed, were they successful? I think it would be helpful to have some kind of a piece in the newsletter to say it's finally being adopted, the ordinance changes there, but I don't think people will make the connection when we have to approve the ordinance. I'm not sure people will really understand that the connection. So if there's an opportunity for some education there, and how people access it.
Yep, great minds think alike, Paul. That was already something that we're working on as city staff, as town staff. Yep,
Great, thanks.
yep.
I think all
I'm
the,
in Salt Lake City, which by the way has beautiful complete streets in many parts and chickens right in the city, in backyards that I've seen today when I was walking these dogs that I'm caring for. But anyway, I'm about to hop in a
Lovely.
car, so I'm going to mute myself.
Okay.
Is he worried we're gonna hear chickens? Or dogs barking at chickens?
so all the ones that are in here are associated with educating the homeowners about flood vulnerability and.
Yep, there'll be
water, climate
brochures
change,
and-
all those you ought to just
Yeah,
put
that's,
on the list, okay. That we should do right away, or do as part of
yeah, it's just a,
the process and take credit for doing that.
yep.
There was one about also that I thought was ongoing, honestly, but the growth management permits, so under future land use.
Okay.
Not the last page.
Yep.
No, it's, first page, I think.
Is it first
To the
page?
first page, near the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up from the bottom. This is the GPC and your group to review the impact of growth management permits on a periodic basis, determine its effectiveness in directing growth in a manner that's consistent with the comp plan. I honestly thought that was one of our things in our charter that we had to do
Yep.
periodically, so, That's just doing an assessment of the permits, where they were and so forth, and is it working?
Yep.
So, and then we either say yes, it is, or make a suggestion to make a change. But we should add that probably to sometime this year. To
Okay, yep,
do
we
that.
can add that onto your agendas for the growth permit analysis.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, right under that is your Silver Jackets thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's been done, but we don't know what the results were.
Well,
We've done
you're
it.
supposed to do it on a regular basis, yep.
It's a regular bad. I think it's like every 2 years we do it. We do that, and we also look at, we can amend the growth area in transitional areas, depending on if there's been changes to infrastructure.
Are you referring to the Silver Jacket?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think about
Yeah,
permits.
Is that in
No.
connection with the Army Corps engineer, or is that?
I had no
I
idea.
mean, they might be involved with it at some
I didn't
point,
know, I don't know why I'm thinking that.
because it is on a river.
Oh, so you don't do Silver Jackets every couple of years? That's-
No, no,
Yeah.
no, not at all.
She's referring to that, the study of the
Oh.
Silver Jacket.
So, but we don't know what they determined? yet?
No, I think they're still in the design phase. I'll see if I can get an update on it. I know they had consultants out and they were discussing it. Just don't know where they're at in the progress. That's more the town engineer and Public Works were involved with that one.
Devising a plan might be difficult.
So on that list that we gave you, how much,
How much do you have?
yeah? And how long is that gonna take us to?
Let's see. So right now I have stormwater protections and ordinances. You want to look at the growth area with green space as well as the size of the growth area. Try to do an analysis of the flood maps and growth areas to see where we need to make changes. You have the ADU for the two front entrances to possibly look at for the land use ordinance. You have Silver Jacks, you have the growth permit analysis, and then just in general, anything that deals with education for planning and development for stuff for us to look into on developing either materials to help with education on stormwater, flood mitigation, flood hazard.
That's like months, probably. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
that, we have healthy discussions, so,
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
we
a
won't-
lot of work.
That's a lot of work.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
So,
Those are great minutes. You wanna just share them?
You wouldn't like them, they're just not very wordy, but
Well, that's one thing about this group. We don't need to be
no.
have that many. Bullets are fine.
No, again, I'll type this up as here's the spreadsheet and here are the strategies that you guys have determined that you want to focus on. Is there anything I'm missing? And then you guys can add to it, certainly before I send this over to.
So one of my thoughts on the growth area, can we do this? We've done a broad brush, what the growth area looks like.
Yep.
Right? Can we say this is a growth area and it excludes, really, if we wanted to, down to parcel level?
You can change the size of whatever you want as long as you follow the public hearing requirements before we send it to the state. It's called an amendment to your it's amendment to your comprehensive plan. They're only going to review just the sections that we send them, and then they have to go through a 25-day review period. So before we adopt it and take it to a town vote, we would want to first flush it out, make sure you're comfortable, do our public hearing portion, and then send it to the state for their review. So I don't know if it'll make it by November, but we can,
Yeah.
yeah,
so,
If,
now explain to me again, what
do you think we need to go to the state?
you have to.
Why?
Because it is in the rulemaking under Chapter 208 of Maine DECD's, Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation Forestry, under their rulemaking for Growth Management Act, that any amendment to the comprehensive plan has to be reviewed by the department. You can make grammatical changes, like anything that's just small, little substantial errors or anything that you may have overlooked, But any substantial change, which they would count the amendment to the growth maps as a substantial change, we'd have to submit that. Now, again, they're not gonna look at the rest of your comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
And they're not gonna send it to different departments that it doesn't pertain to them, but they still have to have a 25-day comment period from the public, about
That's
that.
the minimum.
proposed.
But they could take 6 months.
No, it's 25 days they
Okay.
have, yep.
Okay.
And normally, when they make amendments like this, they don't get any public
Yeah.
impact.
Because we've made changes in the past.
Yep. But you had to send it to the state.
We never sent it to the state.
Maybe you all weren't part of the process, but it does go, staff has to send it to the state.
Can you verify that, just because
I contacted the state this week because I knew this was
Really?
gonna come up,
So
yeah.
you changed
No,
the
no, no.
map.
Huh?
We
I,
changed-
if you change the map, yep, you have to send it,
Is that because it's in the plan?
yep.
That's anal. I mean, I could understand if, you know, we were cutting it in half and we didn't have any reasons, but we're complying, actually are complying with their law on Growth Management Act, which I think was the fourth bullet, it was you can't drive growth into a hazardous area, right? So we did this broad brush, but within it, we've now identified some areas that you should put homes because,
And keep in mind, with hazard areas, like shoreland zoning, they can't put affordable housing in shoreland zoning.
sure.
So like, those hazard
There's some
areas, they're not
protection.
allowed to
Yeah,
put,
there's some protection.
right. You have overlays.
So let me ask you this question,
Yeah.
maybe we do it differently. I'm trying to avoid having to go back to the state. If we identified other areas that were like a shoreline zone,
Mhm.
where we want to control what gets built there. I don't want to take away someone's right to build because they have the property, but it has to be managed in a certain way. Can that be done without changing the growth area?
that's a variance, that's at a town level.
Well, it'd be an ordinance, right? It'd be an ordinance where we've identified,
What's the objective? Because right now you have a 20% lot coverage, which is already acting as sort of a threshold to stop you from just putting too much impervious surface on an area. What mechanism are you looking for? What are you concerned about? That way I can try to,
well, concerned about what's been raised, where there's certain areas in town that are, within the growth area, that are open spaces that we would not want to drive growth to because of the amount of flooding.
But you can't, in the shoreline zone, you can't build anyway.
It wasn't a shoreline.
Yeah,
Oh,
if you
okay.
walk from down North Street, you're walking by various streams and rivers going under the road and, you know, culverts. I mean, there's a lot of water, just not in the shoreline zone, but just.
Yeah.
But the DEP is also involved. If you want to build something, you have to be, there's DEP regulations, you can only build or put structures like, 75 feet from a stream or whatever.
That's
where
shoreline
the
zoning as
DEP gets
well.
involved too.
Yep.
The shoreline zone.
yeah. So, I mean, again, your 20% of the lot can be covered. That's already, that's baked in your zoning. So they can't do 80% lot coverage. You know, if they have 1,000, I'm just using it for simple purposes, a 10,000 square foot lot, which wouldn't be I'll say this, it would be a non-conforming lot at that point.
Right.
They'd have to meet your setbacks, and then they'd also have to keep to that lot coverage. So in that case, they couldn't build more than 2,000 square feet. Am I doing that correctly in my math? So that's the limit of the garage, their driveway, the building and any sheds or accessory structures. Any buildings would be considered part of that lot coverage.
Okay.
So that's limiting that, but.
I guess we get the overlay, I guess we can kind of see where that is, how it gets impacted, and if it will,
So you want to see the flood maps?
flood maps overlaid with that
Overlaid.
area, and see what areas could we unintentionally drive growth through because of being identified as a growth area. That
But they
potentially
can't-
the LD 2003 could be used in some manner to drive growth to, that doesn't make sense from potential hazards from water, stormwater.
So again, your shoreline zoning allows for a single family, but it has to be double the frontage. And it doesn't allow for multiplexes and multifamily. It doesn't allow it in shoreland zoning. So I don't know where,
Whether or not shoreline zoning covers all areas where there could be risk for stormwater, this is the question. And if there is, if not, if it does, then maybe there's not an issue.
But the example you just used, if we look at it graphically, I mean, to appease that, would you say 2,000?
it's 20% lot
Yeah,
coverage.
so you're still, I mean, I don't see how that would even, you know, cause an impact if it wasn't there or there. I mean, I don't wanna prevent people from, like
No,
you
right,
said,
right, I know.
you know, I don't wanna prevent people from saying, your property is now poison, you're paying taxes and you can't do a damn thing with it.
Absolutely not.
But, oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I guess if we look at that and see how
Yeah.
it overlays with shoreline zone, then we can ask question if there's some specific areas.
Yeah, the justification for your growth area, and again, I know this was brought up before, your growth area was determined based off 1,000 feet from your wastewater infrastructure. That's higher than the state's requirement of 200 feet mandatory that you have to hook up to public wastewater facilities. So that's your disparity between what you have and what's being proposed. The other thing that it was mentioned in your comprehensive plan is your growth area goes into other zones and maybe it's just a couple parcels. Is that, you know, that's why when I showed you the Venn diagram, there's like this part, you know,
Right.
just, there's a part. I can't say it's
Yes,
all of
we-
it,
We
but,
added the whole parcel.
right. You add a couple parcels in this zone, well, this isn't the
Yeah.
whole zone, but it's a part of it, so. Normally when you do growth areas, you do try to keep it in your zoning. That way, it's pretty consistent and uniform with what your zoning is asking for. Okay, we want growth in this area, so it's gonna be in this zone, and this is our zoning to keep the regulations to the look and feel of what we as a community wanna envision. So, you can make some tweaks, but yeah, you just have to go through the process.
So does the growth area have to be within 1,000 feet of the sewer?
For our thing, it does.
Because that's the way we define
That's the way we
it.
define it. But I guess 200 feet is what the requirement.
That's the state requirement to hook up, mandatory hookup. So we made it 1,000. That's,
Yeah.
I don't know why you guys came up with 1,000, but that's, you know, maybe it's future land, you know, planning. You thought, okay, these places, they might want to hook up to infrastructure later down the road, so.
But we didn't include every area that was within 1,000 feet, right? So like Goose Rocks,
No, because that's a transitional zone, yeah.
put it as a transitional
Yeah.
zone. Which I was thinking about that associated with LD 2003, when it says you gotta have public sewer and water.
But it's zone
Not a growth
multifamily.
area.
It's not zone multifamily.
That's not a growth area.
Yeah. It's a transitional zone.
I think it might be a good idea to look at that, what you were suggesting. You know,
Yeah.
to conceptualize it and understand better, because it's a lot of information
Yep.
being thrown at everybody, especially the public. To have those maps, the overlays, and examples and scenarios of what it means if we make decision changes.
Yep.
Okay.
We happy with that list?
What, I mean, the other thing too is, do you foresee us, having other things that we're gonna have to deal with as a committee too? I mean, I know that's come up in the past, we're like, hey, this is, you know, you gotta deal with this. Is there anything that's gonna,
Not that,
if we put a timeline together, and it looks like, you know, this is gonna take several months, should we anticipate other things we gotta deal with in between, that we might extend that out?
I don't have anything right now, but again, I don't have a crystal ball to know. There's gonna be other things that pop up, or the Board of Selectmen may say, this is definitely more of an urgent need that we need to address now,
Okay,
and make changes. But I don't have anything right now. Outside some of those minor land use ordinance changes, which I'll just bake it in with the rest of those other things you're gonna be looking at, for the November ballot, but I don't have anything.
so then we just prioritize what we're gonna work on.
Yep.
Snowball effect, like, you know, what she was referring to as, we'll be professors and snowball effect.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
just
I
work on the
personally
things that we can accomplish and
I
go.
would personally lean on the stormwater piece more than
Yep.
Yeah.
the rest. But I don't know, what's your, of those areas, the stormwater growth? Silver Jacket might tie into stormwater. But it's gonna tie into tides and rising sea level rise more than
Yep.
really storm.
Those seem to be the important, most important.
Yeah,
So what I'll do is I will put this in a memo version, and type it up. That way you see, here's the list that you want to send to the planning board and to the, Board of Selectmen. And then we'll see if they have any feedback, and maybe the Board of Selectmen are gonna say, we agree, stormwater needs to be the top priority. Have at it, start doing it.
And again, they're gonna review this list and maybe come up with some priority.
Yeah, they'll give us feedback.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
perfect.
because
Things that maybe they want.
they're looking at us to make the first cut.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect.
We may have missed one that they have as
Yeah.
one of their requirements, and that's fine.
We're just telling them, hey, this is our annual, we're reflecting on what we want to do the rest of this year, and here's our recommendations, what do you think? And they can say yay or nay, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's all I had for that section.
Okay.
All you have is other business, if you have anything.
Any other business?
Hey, it's Paul.
Oh, he's back.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, Paul, we're all done.
Hey, you're all done?
Yeah, we
Can I
signed off.
toss one more in?
Send the action items to yourself. You should have for the next meeting.
Okay, good enough.
You'll get the list from, Galen.
Yep.
Now, Gail's gonna put together the list and send us a memo on what we chatted about with the, priorities, which will then be sent to, the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board for their input. All right, any other business?
Next meeting, April 2nd?
That April Fool's, that April Fool's.
April 2nd?
I don't know, what day is April Fool's?
First.
Is it, the first, okay.
2nd and the 16th?
Yep,
Must be a Monday.
all right.
Good?
You're good with
Make a
it-
motion to adjourn?
making sure you're okay with it. April 2nd is 2 days after Easter, just,
Yeah,
okay. So we'll send that information to you, just FYI.
You gonna bring us candy?
Yeah.
You can bring us candy?
hard-boiled eggs. All right,
That'll be a short meeting.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, adjourned. Thank you.